Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome everyone to Tiger Claw Radio. Yes, friends, it's that time again. This week, the Spring Tracks 10 or 11 or whatever number it is over Battle of the Bits finally rounded out. So we're going to listen to some of the winners off of that. Also, fantasy consoles, fantasy computers. That's the topic of the day. This is something I was just introduced to a couple nights ago, and it's sort of been an explosion here at the dojo. So let's start off with the number one chiptune of all chiptunes, apparently, for this past spring. And this one is called All Bets Are Off, and it is a collaboration between Omni Pigeon Master and Jakerson and Mr. Minister Master. All Bets Are Off. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Stick with us. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the whole fantasy computer thing and what that means, because I had never heard of this before a couple days ago. So there's a term I had seen, the Pico 8 was something I had seen pop up in a couple places. Now, I don't know if you guys do this, but sometimes in order to separate the noise from the things that I'm interested in, my brain will just sort of learn to omit certain things. Okay, so like let's say I'm looking through like the Steam storefront or whatever and just trying to find games. There's certain games that just typically don't appeal to me, so my brain has just, it's almost like they aren't there. So that was what the Pico 8 was. I'd seen that name turn up in a couple places, but I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't super interested in finding out. And I can't really remember what it was that pushed me over the edge to look it up, but this is what I discovered. So something similar to emulators. That you can get an Apple II emulator and you can play old Apple II games. Well, the Pico 8 is an emulator for a system that just never was. So why would they do that? Well, they built a framework. It's based around the idea of technology limitations breeding creativity, and then on top of that, there's integrated dev tools, so you can develop really easily. So not being super interested in the development side of it. It's not that I'm not interested. It's just that I don't really see that happening. This was a pretty popularized program, so a lot of people were able to make games for it. And there's a little browser in game that you can load up and just flip through the things. The games are all about 60 to 70 kilobytes per game, so they're really tiny. And they did it so that the games are embedded into PNG files, and then the PNG file is a picture of the cartridge. So they call it cartridges. So pretty clever. So I picked up the Pico 8, which was $15. And it's essentially just a program on my computer, and I'm learning that the advantages of the Pico 8 is the same advantage that every emulator has, is the portability, right? So apparently you can get this thing on like your you can get a player on your phone, or you can get the Powkitty had a Pico 8 interpreter or emulator on it when I got it, with some mixed success, and apparently there's a version you can get for Amberneck as well, but I haven't made that work yet. So I picked this up last night, and I ended up going to bed late just because I was playing all the games that I could find. Got up early this morning, started doing the same thing. Haven't touched the development tools at all, but just playing the games. One of the things this thing boasts is, there's thousands of games, and that's always kind of like a red flag to me, especially when you're talking about a development tool, because thousands of games does not necessarily equate to thousands of playable games. You could have like 5 playable games and a bunch of young dreamer types who make little tech demos, and there you go. That turned out to not be the case. What do they call it? Explore, which is the in-machine browser. It's curated. It has featured games, new games, search, all that stuff. So I was able to find a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed. When I was a kid, my dad had an IBM 386 machine, which was how one of the ways I first experienced video games was on this machine. And then he also had what they call a luggable, which was a big suitcase computer that you would tip over on its side, bottom would come off, and then you had a monochrome screen on an IBM DOS-based computer. And when my family sort of moved on in technology, my brothers were all playing the NES, and when, I had a hard time getting time on the NES at that age, I would play these old computers. And these games really bring me back to that time. So I've been loving that. I've looked for years I've kind of hoped that something like this would happen just in DOS rather than creating a whole new framework. I was just hoping that we would see like a reemergence of like DOS games. I didn't feel that there was a need for a framework like this, but I guess this is what did it, because all the tools are they're integrated. You don't have to like go download a bunch of external tools. So that's cool. Plain old MS-DOS is apparently very difficult to program for what I gather, unless you're just doing like Quick Basic or something, QBasic. So this opens the door to a lot of what DMakes. I've been looking at DMakes. Give me a second here. Explore. So what have I actually favorited at this point? Hang on. Exit to Explore. I want to go to favorites and just go through them. Of course, there's a lot of anytime you have DMakes, there's certain games that just are always going to show up. There's a Super Mario Brothers. There's a weird DMake version of Cave Story, which is nigh unplayable. But there's a really good version of Super Sprint, which I spent a lot of time this morning playing. There's a Zelda clone called Zeldo, which I haven't played yet, but looks really good. They remade Super Hot and called it Pico Hot, which I thought was very, very well done, except that it was super short. And, of course, we love Tetris Attack in my house, so I found Pico Depon, which is a remake of Panel Depon, and I played that a ton as well. Some of the other games that were interesting are an Ultima remake called Minima. There was a remake of Super Crate Box called Super Disc Box, and then I've been into the gambling games lately, so I found some decent video poker and a decent slot machine, and a whole bunch of dungeon crawlers, because apparently that's a popular thing in this sort of format. So yeah, this has been really good. I would like to do some videos of just like exploring the Pico 8 library, because a lot of this stuff is really cool. But it becomes very difficult to talk about, I think, on a podcast, because I'm looking for points of reference. Do you know what I mean? I would be trying to explain here's a reason why you should get it, rather than, hey, I played this game that you are all familiar with. Let's compare notes. No, it's a lot of very small games that are available, and the thing was $15. There's some contention about the price. Some people are like, hey, $15 is too much, or whatever. It did seem kind of expensive until I bought it. The only thing is, because part of the price is like all the development tools, I just wanted a player, so it would have been nice to have maybe like a light version, like a version that was cheaper, that was just able to play the games. But then on the other hand, when you develop games, you can also make a standalone player, so you can just go to itch, and I was able to find a bunch of Pico 8 games, externally for free. I don't know. It's fun. I'm still learning about it, so yeah, this is what I'm jazzed up about now. So hold on, shut down. There we go. So that turned out to be a thing, and then there were copycats, of course, because they called themselves a fantasy computer. That's what they called themselves, and something like that didn't exist before. So there, of course, we can't remake the Pico 8, but we can remake the idea of a fantasy computer. So there's many other ones. One such clone is called the TIC-80 Tiny Computer, which is the same sort of... hang on a second. It looks like I'm losing some audio. Oh, we did? No, we're good. Same sort of concept, except the restraints aren't quite as tight, and it's $5 instead of $15. So haven't played much on that one yet. And that one does have a free version that's just the player. $5 will get you the dev tools and all that stuff. So yeah, I loved my MS-DOS games. Part of the reason that I frequented abandonware sites in the 90s on the internet was because I I liked the games. I liked that they were simple, and the ones that were not simple, that were very complex, they used simple tools to achieve complexity, right? So most of it was in your imagination, that sort of thing. So that's been fun. And that is, I think, all I'm going to say about the Pico 8 for now, because I want to play it more. I just coughed up the money for this thing yesterday, so we'll see. All right, hang on a second. So the Steam sale is coming to a close, and by the time this airs, it will be completed already. Now, I wasn't planning on getting much this Steam sale, but that isn't really how it turned out. I got big into development tools. I picked up RPG Maker MV, which was exciting because I had a big RPG Maker kick, a few months back. I picked up Pixel Game Maker MV, which is the same company, but with a side-scrolling action type feel to it, and I've been playing with that some. That's been really cool too. It's not quite as easy to use as the RPG Maker series, but it's coming along. I picked up VN Maker, the Visual Novel Maker, just for the memes, because so that was kind of funny to mess with, but chances are I won't play with it too much. And I think that's been it. The only thing I have left that I really want to pick up is Payday 2. I never got to play Payday 2, and that's $1. So that's in my list of things to pick up as well. How about you all? Did you guys get anything from the Steam and or GOG and or Gamersgate sales or whatever? Those are my picks. I feel the pressure to reopen idle space in RPG Maker VX Ace one last time and try and get it as close to finished as possible, because I'm afraid once I open RPG Maker MV, the newer one that I have, then I'll never go back to it. And that was a really cool project, in my opinion. I had some good things going on. Yeah. All right. So that said, let's go back to the Battle of the Bits Spring Competition and listen to one of the winners. This is Jakerson with Milkshakes on Tiger Claw Radio. Back again in the studio. We got some more fun on the way, but first I want to just take a minute to thank the sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program, and it comes back week after week because of the individuals who give of their resources to keep the lights on. So to them I offer early access to the show. They get access to the Monday Night Morrowind series, and I also, as a tradition, read their names off here in a hall of distinguished gentlemen, a sort of hall of fame, as you will. And these individuals are Hemrock, Tecmo Balls, Narabka, and Eric Kentroller. Thank you all so much, and I hope you're enjoying the party. So that's it. another sale, another Steam sale, which I said I wasn't really going to be doing these anymore, but this one's turned out to be fun. Okay, so that said, why don't we shift gears and head over to the fail bag. Now, you might remember in the last couple weeks, there has been a bit of a kerfuffle between myself and Alex Swingle over the Nintendo 64. And I believe he followed up with that today. But we're going to start with an email from our good buddy Hamrock. All right. Swingle. All right, we got one from Hamrock. He says, Hey, Paisan. Thank you as usual for another episode. It's nice to see you jamming to Cleater Skeeter. He's always a crowd pleaser. That second tune sounded like something out of the Chrono Cross soundtrack. Great picks. Awesome. Glad you dug them. I found your discussion of hidden games on Steam interesting. There's another reminder of the rental store mentality of digital media. It'd be nice if you could simply sell all those games you didn't want on some type of second-hand Steam marketplace, just like you do for those silly trading card things. Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Even if those games went for $1 on average, you'd have over $400. That's true. Yep. When you mentioned years ago that you asked Steam to remove a game from your library, do you mind if I ask why? Sure. I'm going to take a quick break so I can answer that one. I can't offhand remember the name of the game, but it was a review copy of a game that had not yet come out. And the idea was they claimed that it was going to be a cross between The Sims and a slot machine, which sounds weird, and it was. So I got this game, and again, I can't remember the title, but it appeared as like the first game in my Steam collection. So I have to think it started with a number or something like that. And I was playing it, and I wrote down some things, and I was like, all right, I'll set this aside, I'll come back to it later. A couple days go by, I go back to it. All right, let's open this thing up and finish our work. So I open the game, and it doesn't let me open it. It says, your review period has ended. Now, bear in mind the game had not come out yet. But I was like, all right, that's not how this works, guys. If you want me to review your game, you have to provide me with a copy of the game I get to keep. So I didn't end up writing a review for it, which I guess is good for them because it was a horrible game. And I wrote to Steam support, and I was like, hey, can you please take this game off my Steam library? Because I felt like what they were trying to do was like pass out these expired copies, expirable copies, and hope that the reviewers would then in turn go out and buy the game. It was like, no. I'm not doing that. I wish I could remember what the game was, because it was really bad. I'm sure it's one of those games that's like totally abandoned on Steam, and doesn't even go on sale anymore because that requires the developer to, opt into a sale. That sort of thing. Yeah, but that's what happened. Let's get back to the letter. He says, I agree the N64 is not the greatest console of all time, but it did have a reasonable library of decent to amazing games. I've attached a list of over 80 games that I've come up with that I think fall into this category. I do want to shout out 2 of these games, as I don't think they are held in high regard, and they should. Star Wars Episode 1, Pod Racer, and Ogre Battle 64. What are some of your favorite N64 games, especially ones that are lesser known, other than Jet Force Gemini, although that one's good. Good too. Yeah, it's definitely like the game that comes up every time I mention Nintendo 64 and how I've had fun with it. It's Jet Force Gemini. All right, let's see, maybe take a quick note. And I think it's a cool idea to make a legit game for knockoff Chinese consoles. Keep us posted. Did you ever finish that Android RPG? Android RPG. What was happening with the Android RPG? No, I got some Android dev tools and I wasn't able to get any traction with it. So no, I don't think I have an Android RPG that's in progress right now. I can tell you that RPG Maker MV can export to Android, which is pretty cool. So there's that. But yeah, we'll see. As far as creating games for the new consoles, Pico 8 supposedly has a player that works on Anbernic. So I have not yet taken the time to get it running myself. But that is another option for developing new games for those tiny consoles. He says, over the past holiday, I was finally able to finish a few things on my Just for Fun agenda. I completed the novel Star Wars Shadow of the Empire, and it's better than the recent movies. I also finally finished my very long-running portable game of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I logged more than 65 hours over the course of at least 3 years. I really wanted to complete it before diving into the TCR Game of the Month. Speaking of the Game of the Month, I'm excited about Final Fantasy in July. As mentioned before, I'm going with the Mod of Balance ROM hack from the Dawn of Souls Final Fantasy remake for GBA. That mod attempts to up the difficulty level back to the NES variants and implements numerous other tweaks. It also adds a few additional classes. And in my new game, I would have just vanquished Garland. In my new game, I have just vanquished Garland. My team is composed of Paladin, Battle Mage, Master, and Sage. The hack gives the new great twist while keeping the story intact. The first Final Fantasy is one of the few RPGs that I've beaten more than once. I finished both the NES and the PS1 versions. Believe it or not, I actually enjoyed the PS version more. The music was much improved with new tracks, while the graphics were updated, and they kept the same 8 to 16-bit console feel. I didn't like some of the MS Paint high school project, and it didn't look like some MS Paint high school project. I'm looking at you, all of Square Enix's Android ports. I'm looking forward to that Ambernick vs. Pow Kitty review. What's on the desk? I'm rooting for you, Hemrock. All right. So if you want to see his 80-plus list of N64 games, I'm going to post it in the Discord server, which would make more sense than reading the whole thing now. But let's just take a quick peek. All right. Yeah, we see like Mario shows up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 titles. So this is more of a complete list. I'm going to keep this on the side because we're going to get back to this when we do, when we do Swangle's response. And you asked about what my favorite N64 games were. All right, I drew up a quick list of 5 favorites. Number 1 is Pokemon Puzzle League. That is the big one. We're big fans of Tetris Attack in our house. Pokemon Puzzle League did a lot to improve that game. They have a switch. You can switch back to the tiles from Tetris Attack. The only problem is the Tetris Attack had a lot of personality in terms of the sound design, and all of that is absent in Pokemon Puzzle League. Like, there's a mechanic where if you're playing versus mode, whichever side has the most points, the most wins, that's the side that gets to pick the music. That's the side whose stage is going to be used when you play. Now, that's a big deal when you play Tetris Attack because the sound is varied quite a bit. The different stages feels different. The music is very different and standoutish. Whereas Pokemon Puzzle League, music's all kind of samey. It does the job, but it's okay. And that mechanic not meaning as much, I think, sort of took something from a little something from the competitive nature of it. But that's really a nitpick, like a really like teeny tiny nitpick to an overall awesome game. Pokemon Puzzle League is, yes, just realizing it now, that's my favorite game on the system. 4 other ones real quick. Super Mario 64 is probably the game I spent the most time with. Super Smash Brothers. I lumped Quake and Quake 2 together, even though they're better to play on the PC. Those were some of the first like FPS multiplayer experiences I had. And then also, I wrote in Vigilante 8, just because I love those car combat games, and on the PS1, because the whole 3D environment was, that was... I don't want to say it was new, but it was they were really on the cutting edge of what the technology could handle. It was common for those games to have input lag. I reacquired Vigilante 8 for the PlayStation, a few years back, and I couldn't play it because even on native hardware there was input lag. Almost like playing on a bad emulator or something. Native hardware, good TV, none of that stuff. It's just that's the way it was. So I bet if you played Vigilante 8 on the N64, you'll probably have less of that. Thus making it weird to think about it now, but probably like one of the definitive car combat experiences of that era, which is kind of weird to say. I don't know, just a few games to throw out there. Some of the stuff that I found that I enjoyed. I know there's more games that are good, but that's what I experienced. What's on the desk? Okay. Let me look around to see if I have anything physically on the desk. My 8-bit DOE Lite controller, which gets used daily, and I have the POW Kitty, which I've been playing the what is it now? The Pico 8 interpreter on the POW Kitty, but it's really hit or miss. First of all, you have to load all the games inside, side loading it the way you would with any other emulator. And of the 10 I loaded, I think maybe 1 or 2 work. It was a big disappointment. I'm really hoping I can get it set up on the Ambernick and make that work. And it's funny you mention games like RPGs that you've beat more than once, because I have never done that. I've never beaten an RPG more than once. I don't even think I've really beaten an RPG. I ran a save file of Final Fantasy IX for like 5 years, and it finally got accidentally deleted. You'd think that would not be my kind of game, because I don't really have the attention span to play a good RPG, but the stories are really good. I do really enjoy the stories and the environments and all that stuff. If you're interested in checking out the mod of Balance, I'm going to put a link to that on the Discord, as well as his list. So enjoy your journey into Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy. Personally, I'm going to go with the OG version, just straight up, just because, I don't know, just because. It might not be the best way to experience the game, but that's where my interest lies at the moment. Of course, the end of the Steam sale and the interest in like these fantasy computers has sort of put that off. But yeah, that's set up for this next week. Thanks for writing in, man. Hope you're doing well. It's good to hear from you. All right, this is from the Discord. Swingle says, "Open Dingus, more like Open Pingus." Hey, I'm mildly disappointed that you chain read the last few comments, considering Sean and Death Adder wanted your opinion. Did they really? My bad. I'll have to go back and look at that. Hopefully the audience can hear the jokes with my N64 rebuttal. You took it in stride, and I respect that. The hold your ground bit made me laugh like there was an avalanche of "ree" waiting for me. Yeah, I had a good time with that. It was good times. Let's see. So this is in the latest episode thing and not in the failbag area. So I'm going to take a look anyway. Here's a list of the N64 games. Omitted several titles most people like, since the goal was just to mention a top 50 games I think were good. I got to 43, but if I put every title that were basically duplicates, I would get to the mid-50s. And that's what Hemrock did. That's why I kept his aside. Because his... and it's a legit list, but he, like, for example, he's got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Those are all really good games, yes. I would think that the average collector probably wouldn't get all 3, but that's tough to say, because when I was, when I was a lad, I certainly did collect all 3 Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. So it's up to you how you want to handle that. He was able to get 80 plus using that method. But since you're a little bit more restrictive, let's take a look at your list. First is Winback Covert Ops, and this is a game that, and I'm not going to stop, on every game like this, but this is a game that I really have to play at some point, because I was a huge fan, and stay with me, I was a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid around the first game's release. And when I saw a magazine ad for Winback, and in my brain, I wrote it off like Nintendo's trying to get their own Metal Gear Solid. That's what I thought it was. I've been told later in life that that's not the case at all, and that it's actually really good. So I will have to revisit it and check it out to educate myself, as it were. Because that's his number one game, is Winback. It's the first game he lists here. Winback, then we have WWF No Mercy / WCW Nitro. Yep, wrestling on the N64. People love that. Wayne Gretzky Hockey 98. Wave Race 64. Wyally Country Club. Turok 2. Not a big fan of Turok personally, and that's weird because I'm a first-person shooter guy who favorites classic first-person shooters. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Believe it or not, I actually have a copy of that. I got the blue cart here somewhere. Super Mario 64, again, every list of good games for Nintendo 64 is going to have that on there. That was like, I can't think of a more system-defining game than that for the Nintendo 64. You talk about a system seller, that was usually the example that we would give. Star Wars Pod Racer. Yeah, Hamrock said that game didn't get enough love. Star Wars Pod Racer. You know who else really likes that game? My father-in-law. And he's not a huge gamer. Like, he's done some gaming. He bought a PS4 and I didn't, so I guess he's more of a gamer than me these days. But he always enjoyed the Star Wars pod racing game on the PS2. He never went for N64, but he enjoyed the pod racing as well. So there you go. That game gets some love. Just doesn't get it in the press, that's all. Especially because the prequels are so much fun to bash. Star Wars Battle for Naboo. Then we have South Park, Snowboard Kids, Ridge Racer 64. How is that one? Is that any good? I wasn't really big into Ridge Racer back in the day. I loved Ridge Racer, but not like the whole series. And that changed now that I'm grown. So that's one I wouldn't mind going back to play. Ready to Rumble, Quest 64, Pokemon Stadium, Pokemon Puzzle League, honorable mention. Honorable mention, it's not even on the list. It's my favorite game on the system. How dare you? Paper Mario, Ocarina of Time. People love that game to death. I tried so hard to play it. That Ocarina of Time is one of these games where I stand alone, whereas like I couldn't get hooked. And every time I talk about that, inevitably there's always somebody who can't wrap their brain around it. I'm sorry. I would have loved it if I played it when it was new. I would have loved it. I don't know. NBA Courtside, Kobe Bryant / NBA Showtime. Do you like your basketball games? Is that a thing? I didn't know that about you. You really stuck up for sports games when we talked about this last week. So I'm interested to hear where the good sports games are, just to sort of pick your brain at it. Because I've never been a huge fan of sports games, but at the same time, when I would collect for a system, I would usually make sure I would get one. And this was the most true for the Sega Genesis. Like, there's a lot of football games for the Sega Genesis, and they're all very similar. But I got a hold of one of the Madden games for like $1, and that was all I needed. But it did actually get played. I think it was like Madden 96 or 97 or something, somewhere from like the middle range. I don't know. I'm interested to hear your opinion of sports games in a wider scope. Mystical Ninja Goemon, Mega Man 64, Mario Kart 64. Mario Kart 64 is another one. Like, I feel like I cheated myself because when that game came out, something about the 3D graphics, it just was too far from the Super Nintendo version, and the Super Nintendo version was so beloved to me that I was like, oh, it's a big downgrade. It's a big downgrade, which in retrospect was very likely just super duper sour grapes because I didn't have a ton of money, and like most kids, I couldn't get more than one system. So because I knew that was an unattainable game, it's just very, very inferior to the Super Nintendo version. Ken Griffey Jr.'s Major League Baseball, Kirby 64, Jet Force Gemini. Can I get a what? Jerry McGrath's Supercross. Jeremy, not Jerry. Hydro Thunder, GoldenEye, Gex 64, Enter the Gecko, Gauntlet Legends. Now, I played Gauntlet Legends on the PS1 and very much enjoyed it. A little bit mind-numbing, but I played it with my brothers, and, it was a good time. Flying Dragon, F-Zero X, Extreme G, Diddy Kong Racing. We've got a copy of Diddy Kong Racing hanging around. This is something every time this 64 comes up, inevitably this comes up as my, like, a couple of the last ever thrift store finds that I ever found before the internet just came and took over that scene. There was like a couple of Nintendo 64 cards stacked up against each other that were like $1 a piece. And one of them was Diddy Kong Racing, which we bought, and I have. It was my son's first ever favorite game. Before he could talk, when we would turn on Diddy Kong Racing, he'd hear the children during the Rare logo, and he would scream. It was the coolest thing in the world. I loved it. The game itself, was okay. We had some fun with it. The plane mode was really janky. I pretty much hated all the levels that weren't like just driving. So, kind of fun. I would imagine Mario Kart 64 being a lot better. I would imagine, but I don't know. Still a good game. I found that along with Bust a Move 2. The puzzle bobble game. I got that for like 60 cents. And the third game was Donkey Kong 64. And at the time I was there with NG, and he was like, don't get that one because it needs the RAM card and you don't have it. It was $1 and I didn't get it. This was like 12 years ago, and I'm still like, didn't get. It's not even that I want to play it. I just missed out on reselling it for like $10 or something, or whatever I would have got for it. That's really funny. But that's my tangent on Diddy Kong Racing being on this list. Cruisin' USA, which I remember the Cruisin' series more from the arcade personally, but I knew it was present on the 64, but I never really checked it out. Clay Fighter, Bomberman 64. That's another one. It's like, how's the Bomberman game? I imagine that'd been a great system to play Bomberman on too, because of the four local, inbuilt 4 ports on the Nintendo 64, making it more of like a party system. We had Bomberman Party Edition on the PlayStation, which was up to 8 players if you got 2 multi-taps, and we had a multi-tap, so we were actually able to use it with a bunch of people. But 64 version probably, in retrospect, would have been a more feasible solution. The thing about Bomberman is some of the weird ports. Every Bomberman game is Bomberman. They all have that same map where it's like the green level with the cardboard boxes, right? The normal map. But the thing is, the expanded modes are different depending on the version you're playing. So that's my question, is the Bomberman 64, what did that have on it? Even modern day, but like PS3 era, we had it on the Wii, we had it on the PS3. Okay? We liked the Wii version more just because we happened to have more controllers, so everybody could play. But the PS3 version had this like paint mode where everybody, your color of your character, when your bomb would go off, it would paint the floor that color. And whoever had more of the floor painted their color at the end would win. I thought it was a really creative and inventive mode. Never saw it anywhere else but that PS3 version. So ever since then, realizing that the peripheral modes are different, what does this one have? Banjo-Kazooie. God bless Sendu. Thanks for sending that copy to me all those years ago. I really appreciate it, man. That's how I got to enjoy Banjo-Kazooie. Army Man Sarge's Heroes, Army Man Air Combat, and 1080 Snowboarding. I talked about this Swingle with you privately, but just to put it here on the air, at that time when those games were coming out, I was big into extreme sports games. Some of my favorite games in the PlayStation were 2 Extreme and Cool Borders 3. And I still remember this. I was never an A student in school. I was actually a very, very bad student in school. I didn't know it until I was an adult, but I have pretty advanced ADD. And so in school, my brain was just like, I couldn't, I don't know, I just had all these problems. I wanted to be a really good student, but I couldn't. Well, I was in summer school one year for English, and because that was the only class I had to deal with, I got an A. I never got an A in school. It wasn't, not until college as an adult. When I was in high school, I never got one. So that year when I got an A, my mom was like, I'm going to get you a game. I don't think that's quite how it went down. I asked her and she went along with it, but she, was on board. Let's get you a game because you got an A. Awesome. So I picked 3 Extreme, which was not a good game. But I loved the extreme sports games. So that was like the last example when I was getting older. The last example of me getting a bad game and trying hard to like it was 3 Extreme. I tried hard to like that game. It was weird, man. It was a weird game. But 1080 Snowboarding, when that one came out, it was like, oh, there's one that I can't get because I do not yet have a Nintendo 64. NG had one, but I didn't. A couple years down the road, I ended up buying NG's 64 off of him, and that's still, to this day, the one that I have. NG, if you're listening, that's your old 64. Yeah, so that's his list. So remind me, Swingle, what was it that we were originally arguing about? I think it was from the subjective idea that I didn't think the 64 was that great, and you thought it was that great. So, yeah, I don't know. I do stand corrected. You do have a lot of really good games on this list. I also noticed you don't have and I'm hesitant to mention it because it was never one that I played a lot. But NG was always a big fan of Mischief Makers. You might want to check that one out if you're checking out old Nintendo 64 games. I don't think it's that expensive either, because Swingle, for those of you who don't know him, to his credit, Swingle's a man who always plays legit. Doesn't play any games that he hasn't paid for. And what an incredible quality that is. So yeah, if you ever want to check out an old 64 game, check out Mischief Makers and talk to us about it. That's his list. That's not even his comments per se, but that's his list that he left in the Discord. So if you want to check that out, along with Hemrock's list and his mod for Final Fantasy, jump over to the Discord and take a look. Jumping back over to YouTube to see the YouTube comments, I started by trying to find the two replies you were talking about from Sean and Death Adder saying they wanted my opinion, and I'm not seeing them. I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry, Sean and Death Adder. Yeah, I flubbed that one hard. Well, let's move on right along like nothing's wrong. Okay, so let's see comments from the past week. Back it up a little bit in the what is this, the studio thing? Gosh, I hate this, the way this works. Yeah, here we go. There was one on the Powkitty V90 No Piracy Challenge saying, can you play DS games? And I said, no, I don't think it has that kind of power. Stops with Super Nintendo and a handful of PS1 games. And that's about how it is. Everything up to and including Super Nintendo, with a couple of exceptions, a couple of small exceptions. And then there's some PS1 capabilities, but it doesn't have the power to do DS games. At least I don't think so. To be perfectly honest, I've never been into DS emulation at all anyway. I don't know. Sorry, can't help you on that one. Pete Laughenboys said, I forgot how to do this trick. I ripped out my old NES and started playing, and I was like, how did I do it again? Thank you. He's talking about the Double Dragon Full Hearts trick on NES, which was awesome. I love getting comments like that, because I always thought that was a really cool trick. Swingle, one day ago on TCR 392, he says, organizing your Steam collection. Glad you got to stim yourself for a couple of hours. The most I've done is made a list of games to install on my new computer, since it can play everything I have. That, and I wanted to a reminder of how big the backlog got. I tapped out at 700, realizing I had enough with reminding myself the games I wanted to play. I tried out 30 of them since late February when I got my computer. Progress. That's really good. So my question is, of those 30, did you find any games, and I know the answer is yes, at least one, but did you find any games that you stuck with that, like, how do I explain this? Sean always calls them the chosen games. Do you know, like, when you find a game and you make that your game? Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you find anything like that? Anything like you really dug? You've talked to me about a couple of the games, so I know have you played anything through to the end? You tend to do that a lot more than I do. He goes on, glad my Jerry Maguire reference got in a podcast. Yes, indeedy. Desm says, oh, hang on a second. Is that it? No, I think we have one more from Swingle. Okay. Desm says, I recall seeing Dingix when I installed it on my Dingu A320, maybe around 10 years ago or something. I remember there were a few games that were specifically made for it, aside from emulation. It looks like the Dingunity forums are still up. You can probably find some helpful info and feedback there. Yes, that's true. They even have a tool chain and a compiler and all the stuff you need. But it's a professional development environment. There's not an IDE. There's not an accelerated way to do it, and it would be a ton of work to post something on a forum that doesn't get looked at anymore. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but I did look at that a little bit, and I found the development environment and all that stuff, and I tapped out. I couldn't do it. I just wish, I'm wishing for, when it comes to the Ambernic, not just the Ambernic, but all of these systems, I want to see more ways for people to develop things easily. And maybe that means, maybe that means going Android based so that people can just, install APKs or something. But I hear the Android ones don't hold up as well. I don't know. I think the NES IDE, NES Studio, and Game Boy Studio. I think those are great options because you can just develop, Game Boy games or Nintendo games, and those are playable. But I tapped out when it came to native apps, and that sucks because I think there's a lot you could do, especially now being into the Pico 8. It would be cool to have like a drawing program for the Anbernic, something that you can draw sprites in. Just give me a 16 by 16 pixel sheet and a really simple palette, and I'll use my little keyboard keys, and that way when I'm hanging out, I can generate assets for my game. I can already use the Anbernic to make music. I have LSDJ hooked up on there, and there's the one with the pig. The name escapes me, but there's this one similar to LSDJ. It doesn't work on my Anbernic, but if you update the firmware, I think it does. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's time to retire OpenDingux, replace it with something that is a little bit more open and supported. I think that's what the beta firmware is. Like, supposedly you can replace the firmware with a beta firmware that has a complete kernel, making it more of an actual Linux environment instead of just a Linux-based tiny little thing. I don't know. I'm talking outside of my wheelhouse. It just seems like when it comes down to it, it all boils down to the fact that these little tiny consoles are too good. They are too good to just be pirate machines, and that's how they're being marketed right now. Is get yourself an Anbernic. It's an emulation machine, and maybe that's what it does better than anything else. I'm just saying, the potential for making these things something more is there. Desm, good to hear from you, brother. Hope you're doing well. By the way, check out Desm's videos because he's been doing some good work lately. All right, Death Adder. I feel like no matter what Swingle presents to you for N64 games, they will be shot down. It's just not your thing. I get it. Not everyone has to like everything. For example, I put in so many attempts into liking the Pokemon series, Street Fighter 4, and Sea of Thieves. 1 million attempts, 0 ounces of fun were had. Or like somebody trying to take a comfy Xbox controller out of my hand and replacing it with a mouse and keyboard. We aren't living during the Cold War anymore. Comfy controllers exist. That's pretty funny. Mouse and keyboard are loved by millions, but not by this bro. Also, without getting into the whole Death Adder needs to Steam with us bros conversation with Swingle, waiting around the corner, putting up pops and zip ties. With putting pops and zip ties. Wow, awesome joke that I totally botched. Sorry, bro. I did click on the Steam icon on my desktop over the weekend to check out the summer sale and had some fun messing around with it. I somehow have like 100 games on my Steam account. I ended up making a category of about 25 games that I will realistically play and enjoy. I called it the cream of the crop. It helped a lot even with my small library. Steam is a pretty neat app. I can't play Harvester or Portal 2 on my console after all. Yeah, I'm glad you are giving Steam a little try-a-Rooney. That does exist, the whole let's play Steam games together. I'm keeping that door open because, you're in the bro club and we miss you, So if you if you ever saw a game that had multiplayer capability that you were interested in, sound off and let us know because I would pick it up. Meanwhile, I'm trying to make my Steam experience more console-like. Like I actually got the HDMI hooked up to a TV, and the sound is coming out through a TV, and I sit down there with my controller, and I'm looking into getting a headset for my phone so that I can Discord with a headset while I play games with the controller. Very much like, the Xbox experience or something, but with Steam. So while you're checking out Steam, I'm going more console-y, but not a lot. Maybe we can meet in the middle and play some hide and seek with Dead by Daylight or something. I don't know. Good to hear from you, brother. Hope you're doing well. Gaming Beast 82, good old Sean, says, since Postal 2 was mentioned by Senior Adder, it would be fun to try out multiplayer in the future. I am so down. I know the multiplayer in Postal 2 is not going to be great, but I'm down for it anyway, just because. I played all the way through Postal 2 on the GOG. It was before the Galaxy client, though. This was like back when the only real way to play GOG games was to just straight download the DRM free and install whatever. Played all the way through it then, and I wasn't expecting to. It was one of those games I just gave it a little try, ended up playing it all the way to the finish. Yeah, it's really cool. It didn't take a long time, to be fair. Didn't play it on a high difficulty, to be fair, but played it through to the end. It was good. It's a good time. Then I got it again on Steam later when the what is it, Apocalypse, whatever, the newer iteration of Postal 2, the new expansion. I don't know. The magic wasn't there. Maybe it's a good expansion, and I was just past my Postal phase. But I did acquire that, so I'm sure if you wanted to do some multiplayer, that would be a good game to do it. Tell you what, Sean, why don't you go ahead and install it, and I'll install it again on my end. Since when I see you online, typically what happens is we have a very limited time to play games, and we usually just go with whatever happens to be installed at that time. So while I am recording, to make sure this happens, because otherwise I'll forget, Postal 2. Postal 2, Postal Redux. That's what I have on Steam. I forgot about Postal Redux. I actually really, really enjoyed that. What? Postal 2 is 12.17 gigabytes? Why? The original Postal 2 was like one CD's worth. It was like 500 megs. I don't know. Whatever. I'm installing it. We'll see what happens. When I open up Postal 2 in Steam, by the way, the very first thing that comes up is a review from Death Adder, which I'm leery on reading on the air just because I don't want to make our good buddy hide in this hidey hole again. But yeah, I'm reinstalling it. We'll give it a shot. Is that the fail bag? Is that it? Did we do everything? Oh yeah, there was one more thing that I wanted to respond to in Death Adder's comment, where you talked about, let's see, it was the very first thing you said, where it was like, I feel like whatever he says, you're going to shoot down. Okay, I can see why that would be a thing, but there's a couple of things. I value the disagreements that I have with Swingle, because Swingle and I, as adults, have found a way to not like the same things and still get along. On top of that, because he has this personality where he likes to jab at people, I find if you find those areas where we disagree and you kind of poke them a little bit, a lot of good times can be had by that. So when he comes at me, I try and have as open a mind as possible. I'm still not a huge N64 guy, but based on this conversation, I'm inclined to think that's more just because the games are so expensive, not really a quality of the console type thing. Because I realized since then, yes, there are some terabad games on the 64, but what console doesn't have them, right? So you can't really point to the Castlevania on the 64 and be like, look, bad system, bro. You know? It's just that that's not part of the conversations. The good games are really expensive for whatever reason. I mean, if you really wanted to get into it, AliExpress, they make clone carts. It's like $17 or a little less than $20, and you can get any 64 game in the book as long as you don't mind having an inauthentic copy. Which, you know, that's an entirely separate argument. But yeah, good system with some weird hardware quirks. I don't like the fact that you need a RAM card. I think that's silly pants. And the games are expensive. That's also silly pants. But I love the Sega Genesis, and that was a way worse offender when it came to like console add-ons. Way worse than the 64. So yeah, I don't know. And the controller is not great. I'm sorry, it's not. But you know, these days, if you're gonna play 64 like on an emulator, or if you're gonna play it on even on the Wii, right? You don't have to use the old controller anymore. The old Pro controller that the Wii had, worked pretty well for Nintendo 64 games. I played through most of Mario 64 that way. Back when the online services were still running, you could see how long you played each Wii game. And I put like 40 hours into Mario 64 using that controller. Felt better than the original 64 controllers. Held up longer. You know, mine are still good. Yeah, so the controller being derpy is something that's a little bit easier to mitigate these days. I don't know. I think we had a really good back and forth about this one. I appreciate it. Hemrock for dropping his list, and Swingle as well. I think it's a really good back and forth. I still think I'm right. Well, you know. Guys and gals, you know what that sound means? Time to hang it up. Thanks so much for listening. Come join us on the Discord and hang out. Whatever it is you're dealing with this week, as you move back to work or back to school or whatever it is you're doing, I hope it's going well for you. I really do. I'll see you next week.